We use Tally for every one of our clients.
So how many tax returns do you guys do in a typical year?
I think we did 500 this year.
Before there is this Tally 4, how did you guys handle this?
Yeah, before it was super messy. We did not have, as we've grown a lot over the past 4 years. So like our work paper standardization needed some help, which Tally 4 has definitely helped out a lot with because it forces everything into one standard work paper that we then use as the work papers. But before we were just using Excel. We were just using QBO and we would export, the 2 years of P&L, the 2 years of balance sheet. That was what we would use for our work papers. I don't know, it probably saves at least an hour per return. And then just for tax prep, and if we're doing tax projections for clients and we actually need to get the K1, like get an idea of what the K1 is going to look like, then we also use it for the projections.
Yeah, well, that's huge too. Some of the bullets under the Tax Hero section of Tally 4. Automate your book to tax, deliver tax returns faster, minimize extensions, reduce staff turnover, focus on tax strategy, right? Tell us what that means to you, Shane.
The more time we spend on moving one expense, or like aggregating 10 expenses into the legal line or into the accounting line or into the other deductions, like that's just a waste of time, frankly. So Tally 4 really cuts down on the administrative preparer's job of aggregating various general ledger items into one line on a tax return so that we can focus more on how much can we put into your 401k this year? Like, what is the R&D tax credit going to look like? How much cash do we just need to have on hand on March 15th and April 15th of 2023 or next year, whatever, so that our clients, who we all have like a deeper relationship with, can decide on whether or not how much house they can afford, or if they're going to bring on a new business partner, things that actually add more value.
Focus on that people part because it's the health, it's the wellness. Like, it's counterintuitive that during tax season, you should make your team have a holiday. No one can sustain that mental performance. If you want optimum performance, get them to work 4 days. Have a long weekend. Like during tax season, yes, don't get them to work 16-hour days. They're not going to be as effective.
The 4-day work week. Shout out to Tim Ferriss. That's a book that's
4
still
hour.
popular.
No, it's 4. His
hours.
is 4 hours.
Oh, yeah.
4
Yeah,
hours.
4 hours, dog. Yeah.
He took it a long way further.
May I have your attention, please?
Don't be tardy to the Coach McKenzie party. That's right, you're listening to Varsity Tips, formerly known as Nick's Tips with Scott and Nicole, where they sit down and discuss a hot topic to get Nick's hot takes and tips. It's the same show you've grown to know and love. We're just calling it something new to fit the curriculum here at Accounting High. So lace up your sneaks and stretch out because Varsity Tips is now in session.
I repeat, may I have your attention, please?
This is another public service announcement brought to you in part
by Accounting High.
The views and events expressed here are
of the next generation of accounting and tech professionals leading this space.
The events and suggestions are not to be taken lightly. Children should not partake in the listening
of this podcast.
Anything else?
Yeah.
So without further ado, introducing the star of our show,
Nick McKenzie and Scott Scarano.
We're going to have a problem here.
Today on the podcast, we have Nick Sinclair. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so
What's up,
Nick and I met, what was that, 4 years ago in San Diego?
This episode is Nick's Tips because it's Nick and Nick's. That's this episode. So, Nick, you're going to give us a bunch of tips today. Nicole's going to lead with the
Nick's
questions.
got way more tips than this. Because Nick has the extra C, so there's more tips.
Yeah, you got at least one extra tip. And it's Nick's. If we spelled your name and last initial, it says Nick's. This is easy.
So Nick, tell us about yourself.
So I owned a financial planning and accounting business for over 12 years. Absolutely loved it. And then I stumbled into what I do today, which is the offshoring and building global teams by just going to the Philippines for a entrepreneurs organization board retreat, and sort of stumbled across outsourcing, built my own back office, and then other firms wanted to not set up like we did, but more use our offices and our structure. And fast forward 9 years, we're 2,800 plus staff, putting on about 150, 170 team members a month, and It's now my
Wow.
full-time business. So, yeah, got out of the accounting and financial planning and advice and now
Talk
just
about
do
growth.
this. Yeah, it's been,
That's funny.
wow.
So I recently joined EO in San Francisco. So how many countries are you guys supporting?
So at the moment, we support 9 countries. Yeah, 9. We've got offices in 6 at the moment. So,
Are you spending your time mostly in the Philippines or in Australia these days?
I mean, first 3 years I spent, or first 4 years of the business, I spent almost every second week in the Philippines. And then the last 4.5, 5 years, or obviously COVID, I couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I've been spending most of my time in North America, to be honest.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's a big part of where our expansion is. So I was spending a lot of time pre-COVID, and then post-COVID, that's where I'll probably spend a lot more of my time.
What percentage would you say of your client base is in North America?
At the moment, it's 35%. So we've only really been there
Oh, wow.
for 4 or 5 years, but within 2 years, we think we'll be more North American than we are Australia, New Zealand.
Well,
Wow.
last time we caught up, you said that the size of Texas is bigger than the entire continent.
If you look at Texas, it's got more accounting firms than Australia. If you look at California, it's got more accounting firms than Australia. So the US is 10 times the size of the Australian accounting market. And then you've got Canada, which is, roughly 25% bigger than the Australian market as well. So it's just significantly bigger.
And do you find the crossover? Obviously, I think of the 9 countries, they're all predominantly English speaking.
Yes, all but one.
All but one. What's the one that doesn't?
They're Spanish speaking. Yeah, we are looking at South America. It is an interesting market that's evolving.
You said you're onboarding 150 staff a month?
Yep. Well, I'm not, but the team
You're
are.
not.
How many of those staff do you actually ever meet?
Look, I try to meet them all at least once a year. I do go there a couple of times a year and just basically floor walk. I'm pretty active on social media. Everyone that joins our company, I will connect with them on LinkedIn and try and have a conversation. It is hard. I mean, within our business, we have 370 support team members that are working for all the team members that work with the clients. So if you want to call it 2,400 team members work for clients and 370 work for us helping serve them. So I have a lot more interaction with those 370 than I do with the 2,400 working with clients. But in saying that, I do try to make an effort, but it is hard. Like when you've got so many people, it's like walking around a school. Like I walk around my kids' school and
It's
we
campus.
we got more employees than the school does. So you walk around and go, it's impossible to know everyone. You know faces and you know names, but it is hard to have a relationship with all of them. It's more just the team that I work with more day to day that I have a deeper relationship with.
And where are you finding your staff?
Look, I think in the Philippines, we're lucky. We get over 3,000 applications a month. So there's no shortage of talent. It's a matter of getting the best of the best is probably the way to say it. So our talent team, which are amazing, obviously manage that process and filter them down to get only the top ones to put forward to clients. But there's no shortage of accountants over there. We are exploring other markets as well. We've got a presence in South Africa and we're looking to expand that more. So again, there's no shortage of strong talent there. And I think that's the good thing.
So accounting is a universal language. That's why you're able to go across borders, because at the end of the day, the work that they're doing, is it very similar across countries?
Yeah, look, I mean, audit's audit to a degree. It just varies amongst countries. Tax and compliance does vary, but you can teach that. And we've set up a training business. I always talk about speed to competency or speed to success. How quick can we get someone that is not trained in that region up to success so that they can function in that region if it's a tax role? Bookkeeping's probably one of the easy ones to spin up because it is debits and credits. It's not so much the tax part. You can teach the tax part, but management accountant's it's universal. So that's one of the benefits, I suppose, of this global world that we do have now. It's probably more opened up in people's eyes now that it's a matter of where can you get the best talent globally. It's no longer about just local. And this is a point that a lot of people think, we're taking money away or we're taking roles away. But you could say 90% of our clients, probably 95% of our clients, have grown their local team while also growing like an offshore team. So it's not replacing roles. It's helping them get talent that they need to deal with the capacity they've got.
Yeah.
Well, you've got over 3,000 people applying a month. So you're giving a lot of jobs. That's not to be discounted either. I understand a highly localized mindset of taking our jobs from our people, but the world is flat.
Oh, look, we pay tax in many countries, which we contribute in a good way, which I always see that as a good thing. I mean, we invoice out of the US, so the US get their part of it before it goes to the Philippines.
Okay.
But it's a great thing. It is creating an environment globally where people are getting roles, and it's lifting everyone up, not just set countries.
So, Nick, I know before COVID, you guys had physical offices, right? And that was part of your selling point, was that everything's secure. They show up, they leave I think they even left their phone, right, at the door, all the employees
they
when they came in.
Lockers, so they can't go into
lockers.
production areas with any equipment. It is basically a work area. And then we have, so a floor plan of our office would be, call it 2,500 square meters. And 30% of that is non-productive. So that's where our cafes are, our medical clinics, our breakout areas, the lockers, chill-out zones. So, yeah, it's very secure in that you leave all of that outside. When you're inside, you're working.
So how did you manage COVID?
It was, it was challenging. The Philippines government gave us 6 hours to move. At that time, we only had around 1,200 team members, but literally...
Wait, 6 hours?
Yeah, they're good. Well, they gave us a week's notice to get everyone back into the office, so they gave us a bit more time to come back. But look, they gave us 6 hours notice. They ended up extending it. We had people, and that was at 7 o'clock at night. They gave the notice to basically say that by midnight, basically, we're shutting everything. You can't leave your house. So we had to get everyone in the office, get them off the network, get their computers out, sign everything out. Our team worked basically 24 hours straight. We didn't meet the deadline, but they allowed us to continue to get everyone out safely and back home. And yeah, it was a challenge, but that was a big challenge, I suppose, during COVID, because we were used to working in office. Our security and infrastructure was set up largely for that. We did have some remote team members, so we run what I call corporate security. So it's layers of security that you just don't see in small business. So we had to pivot. We had to basically still have that level of IT. They were using all of our equipment, so they still had no USBs. They still had none of that. We were running, I suppose, in the backgrounds on the software. We can manage ins and outs of the software, so we don't see what's being done. But if there's a significant amount of activity, we can see that, which then triggers and alerts our IT. So, look, it was a challenge, but I think it was globally. Everyone just had to adapt, whether you liked it or not. It was what it was.
Yeah, and even in the U.S., regardless of where you are, you have to be mindful of security, and someone can rip you off in any place. So if anything, you guys are probably doing more than most firms are doing in the US.
I haven't seen anyone come close to what we do. And that was the thing. It wasn't our first rodeo. Like, we'd done it many times. We were able to pivot and get everyone off, and we've got a big IT team. So they were stretched, but we got it done. And then we just continued as it went on, because as we know, no one knew how long it would go. Like, my initial thing was, can't go that long, a couple of months most. But as it evolved, we had to.
He says 2 years later.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Have you seen the people's outlook on outsourcing change over the last 5 years?
To be honest, we've never been busier. So the last 2 years.
Well, you say the last 5 years, Nicole, but I think it's got to be post-COVID that people's mindset really shift.
Yeah, I think for Australia, they were quite involved with it. The market, for example, pre-COVID was around 30% of accounting firms outsourced. Post-COVID, it's over 50% now. But if you look at, particularly we noticed in North America, because there was a lot of what I call traditional firms where you've got to be in office, we deal with clients that are around the corner, but they weren't traditionally, the cloud adoption wasn't as high in North America. And we've just seen that absolutely go now. People are now open to go, well, during COVID, it didn't matter where our team was sitting, and a lot of people moved from the state that they were living into to a more tax-effective one or COVID policy one. So we saw that predominantly in North America. What we also saw was probably the the second and third tier firms that always were able to get graduates, but they largely fed off the big four, the big 10 firms, really struggled. That talent pool stopped. So they really struggled, and they were coming to us saying, look, we just can't get people. So there was always a talent shortage in accounting, even pre-COVID, and that was when markets were good, and now it's bad. And for me, I think the talent shortage problem is actually 2 to 3 years away. It's not now. Like, people are feeling it now, but I actually think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And the logic around that is, if you look at the immigration numbers going into most Western countries, which supplemented a lot of the accounting roles, that was quite significant pre-COVID. And obviously during COVID, all the borders were locked. So it caused this huge shortfall of talent. Then you've got on top of that, if you look at the actual statistics of people going into education in accounting, particularly Australia, America, Canada, UK, it's actually been declining for over 20 years, the number of people going in. If you look at the Australian stats, it was propped up by international students coming to Australia to study accounting. So if you look at the actual accounting stats, it looked like there was people, like it was growing year on year, but they're all international students, and a large amount in Australia were from China. So you take out those two factors, less people are studying, less immigration coming in, there's now a big shortfall. Not as many people started studying in the last 2 years than they have in the years before that in accounting. So that's where that shortage is going to come in 2 to 3 years' time. And immigration's only starting to get back up and running again, and they can't just open the doors and let too many in each country because they just wouldn't be able to deal with it initially. So, yeah, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I think good firms still can always find good talent.
Well, no, that kind of brings up the point, though. How about in the Philippines? Are there more people going into accounting in those universities?
Probably the numbers, like when I spoke to one of the major universities in the Philippines a couple of months ago, their numbers did drop. So the number of students graduating now is the same as it was pre-COVID, and that's what they were highlighting to us. But when I really challenged them on how many have gone in during COVID, like compared to normal enrollments, it was 40% down. Wow. So, but insane
overall across the board, or is it because most people didn't apply anyway to university?
Yeah, well, I think
during COVID,
you just didn't have as many going through. You also had all the CPA exams basically put on hold for 18 months in the Philippines, so you don't have the CPAs finishing. So they might have finished their uni, but the fourth year in the Philippines is actually the CPA programs built into it. So that got dragged out. But in saying that, you've got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of accountants working in market, and you've still got, on a good year, you're getting 25 to 30,000 accountants graduate a year in the Philippines. So even at 40% less, there's still a lot of talent coming out.
So all the employees that you're hiring, are they coming from Big Four? Are they coming from another industry?
It's an interesting one, the Philippines market. So EY has the market. So they have 6,500, 7,000 accountants as the largest employer in the Philippines. They do over 50% of the audits, I think, on their stock market. That was the last numbers I looked at a while ago. And then if you look at the second firm, number 2, we're bigger than them. So the second, third, and fourth tier firms they've probably now got close to that 1,500 staff. But there's there's EY, and then there's like 2, 3, and 4.
Oh, wow.
There's a huge, huge gap. There's a big difference. And so we probably sit in number 2 from an employer in the Philippines of accountants. We're the second largest, but we're the only accounting firm, traditional firm. We are obviously an international provider of talent. So it is interesting. They didn't see us coming. I was actually a few years ago on a PICPA, so the CPA program. I was at their conference on stage with, I think there's 5,000 people there. It was like crazy. It was like a football field of people. And the EY chairman was next to me for the Philippines, and I was speaking, and at the end of it, we walked off stage. He goes, "I'd never heard of you." He goes, "But I knew our talent was going somewhere after 2 years, and now I know where."
Oh, wow.
They're your fishing hole.
Well, I mean, their model over there is they take 50% of the CPA board passes every year in the Philippines, EY do, and they pretty much work them for 2 years. I won't say how they work them, but they do work them, and after 2 years, a large amount of them leave unless they're going through to leadership. So they do have I met with one of their partners off the record, and he said, look, our things 2 to 3 years is what we want to get out of them. we're happy if they move on because they're cost effective and they're productive at that stage. We can't have 7,000 high expense people. So it works well for us.
So you take them on their graduate almost.
Well,
like they graduated from EY school.
Basically, yeah.
How about your churn? About what do you guys have as far as churn? You're hiring a lot, but you're losing a lot.
Look, it's around the international standard. COVID's been interesting. The last couple of months we have had a spike because we returned to office. So we did see a spike, but we've seen no shortage in replacing them is probably the positive thing. I think when it comes to churn, our team members become highly trained and highly skilled. So even in like our training business trains them so that they can become an EA in America, so that they can become a CPA in America.
They can do tax.
Like they become highly skilled people. So the routes for them is that they either go and freelance, or another BPO that has significantly less amount of accounting clients will get an accounting client and pay them 30, 40, 50% more. And I actually had it out with another BPO owner a couple of years ago, about 4 years ago. It was a very heated conversation. I said, look, you can't just pay 40, 50% above market. Like, we do industry benchmarking. We have a benchmark report on what salaries are in the Philippines, both with us and outside of us. We do a huge report on this. And he said, look, the client has no idea. They just want someone that can do the tax work because they need someone. So, and it's still a lot cheaper than where it is in America or Australia. And I'm like, that's not the right thing to do by the client, making them pay significantly more than market without them knowing. I said, it's a short-term approach. All that will do is push up salaries. So look, we do lose people, but I put that on us. It's our fault if we lose a team member because we're not doing enough to keep them with us. And sometimes it's pay. Sometimes the thing with the Philippines is 20% of their GDP is from overseas foreign workers. So that's Filipinos leaving the country to go and work overseas, earn international money and send it back to the Philippines. So it's 20% of their GDP. It's huge. So we do have team members that will leave and go and work. For example, if they've been working with us for 4 or 5 years with an American client, they might move to America, and then they're getting, instead of getting 40,000, we call it 40,000 US or 20 to 40,000 US, they'll go to the US and earn 80 to 120,000. And then they can send it back to their family in the Philippines. So we do have that, but then we do try and transition them to go to their client. But in some cases, they'll go to Abu Dhabi or countries like that where they can, in essence, get paid quite well, live really cheaply, and send all the money back to the family.
So effectively, if you adjusted that 30% number, you say 30% of their income or 20% of the income of Philippines is coming in from working
20% of the GDP.
Change the GDP. If you adjusted that for people working in BPO and working for places like you, because that effectively is, they're working for someone else, somewhere else, and the money's coming in there. I mean, isn't that the same thing?
Yeah, look, if you look at the BPO industry as a whole, it's about another 20% of the GDP.
So that could be 40%.
Yeah, it is significant.
Yeah. And so my other question is, at what point does their wages get corrected, or are like, if it's a 40 to 80 ratio, it's basically half, or about, for the equivalent of a person that they're basically getting trained up, they're working for BPO and they're good enough, they could go to the US and make double just because they're on our borders and on our soil. Is that the only difference?
Pretty much, to be honest. Like, one of our US clients has, call it 10 managers in their accounting firm. 5 of them are in the Philippines and they've got US people reporting to them. So they are just as competent. I think that it's a hard conversation. A friend of mine is big into remote workforces, and she's into this, I suppose, push around. It doesn't matter where you live, you get paid the same globally. But it is a hard one because you look at cost of living where they are is very different. So it's like when you live in America, it's more expensive to live. I think you also look on the flip side of a lot of...
Makes me want to leave America. Almost. I could get paid exactly the same and move somewhere else, and it's a lot cheaper.
It is.
Well,
they have that.
As an employer too, there's so many, especially in California, the employment law is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get so frustrated with it, where I'm like, I'm going to hire another state, or I'm going to hire out of the country because I have so much liability as an employer in California, and people cost more. God. And so by creating, I know that they're trying to protect the employer employee, and I get that. But at the same time, what's happening is more and more people are going to start outsourcing because they don't want that liability anymore.
And I think that's the thing. Yeah, labor laws in the Philippines are very similar to California, where people use us, we manage, and that's our burden.
You're doing all of that. You're handling all of that.
That's your burden.
Yeah.
You're getting the law. You're getting sued.
Yeah. But I think, Scott, if you go back to that point of if they all came back to the Philippines to a degree, a lot of the roles that a lot of that are overseas foreign workers that do leave the Philippines are in nursing, and they are in where they work on big, large ships. So they've got a large sailing and captains, and they're quite skilled in that. So a lot of the labour that does go is in those industries, and accountants probably 4 or 5 on the list of roles that does go over. I think the bigger challenge is that I don't agree that where you live, like if you are a Filipino living in the Philippines, that's where you should get paid. It shouldn't be the country that you work for, because I think that you would then have significant disparity between, obviously, if you lived in the Philippines on an American wage, you'd be living like a king. Like you'd have 15 cooks, you'd have 12 cleaners, you'd have, because the local people there on their salaries have their own cooks, they have their own cleaners, they have what they call yaya. So they're already living a good lifestyle in a lot of cases. There are the ones that aren't. There are the lower economic people that aren't, but I think it's relative to where you live. And I think like an Australian couldn't come and live in America on an Australian salary because it's 30% less. Like we just couldn't afford to. So I think that's one of the challenges, but there's a lot of push for that to say, oh, well, it doesn't matter because their competency is the same. Why shouldn't they get paid the same? On the flip side is...
Or why shouldn't an American get paid less if they move out of America and go somewhere else? Because we're stupid here. I swear we are not very smart. The more and more people I meet outside of our country, the more stupid I feel.
Maybe that's saying for the people you're meeting. Maybe they're just smart.
Maybe.
Who are you surrounding yourself with?
Yeah. Part of it is like scoping out and thinking, all right, this is going to sound like an off the wall question, but what makes a house a home? I did ask this question to my team recently, and we came up with some core answers. If somebody were to ask you this, what makes a house a home?
In the context of personal life? Like what?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So for me, it's family, and that's probably the big one. It's the link of, I think that sort of links to why people won't move around the world as much, because it's that deep connection with your family. If that whole support network of mine is, on the Gold Coast in Australia. So if I was to move away and live on an island in the Philippines for 6 months and in the snow for 6 months, I wouldn't have that support network. And I think the other part of it is it's the kids and their education, being able, giving them that stability. So
a lot of people just say people. Some people say they're plants. Some people say they're pets. And some people say the place that they're in, the environment. Places. So the environment and where you are makes your home. So it really does depend on where you physically are. So you're paying for your environment. Like California physically is a nicer place to be. The weather is beautiful.
Yeah,
and it should be the most expensive place to live because it's clean, it's beautiful, it's nice. And you go across the border to Mexico, it's dirty. So the taxes and everything else, generally speaking, are because of where you physically are.
Depends on whether you're on a secondment too. Like we see that, like if you look at the Philippines has a lot of Americans. It was a territory of America for 49 years. So there's a lot of Americans living in the Philippines running these outsourcing companies and different companies there.
And are they making the money?
Well, they typically are getting not their normal American wage. They're normally getting 20 to 30% accelerator on top of that for living there, plus the schooling for their kids paid for, plus their housing. Like they are getting paid more. But that is because of the reality of it is you're moving to a developing country to go and help that company do what they do. So they get a bonus, I suppose, incentive being an accelerated salary and everything else given to them. So yeah, that's normally the challenge though, is when they go there and get stupid money to be there.
There's some really wealthy areas in the Philippines, communities.
To be honest, there's places there that I haven't seen a nicer place in America or Australia. Like some of the places there, it is crazy. Like it's just like being in America or Australia.
Have you considered living there?
I have many times over the years. I'm divorced and I have my kids every second week. So that is what stops me from even
family.
Yeah, I'm tired here because of the kids. But when the kids out of school, I would probably be more of a global citizen. Just there's a few countries I'd live between America, Canada, Philippines. I love the snow, so anywhere there's snow, Japan.
I've never met an Australian that loves the snow.
Well, they love it because they're not in it, though. Right?
It's hard. Our snow sucks. Like our snow's not real
It's
snow.
melty water. Yeah,
It's
not.
No, you get more in a night than we get in a season. So
I was playing Aussie rules on Sunday and I dislocated my finger for the first time. So that was
Ooh,
fun.
that's right.
First time you're getting brittle, Nicole.
Well, I've jammed like every finger, but I never actually dislocated it. But when my teammates just popped it back into place.
Was it just hanging there?
It didn't go sideways. It like crunched, like overlapped it. And then she just crunched it back into place.
Very Australian sport, old AFL.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
wow,
I started playing Gaelic. So I went from my Gaelic game, which is an Irish sport, to
I remember
Aussie
talking to you,
rules.
and that was one of the things I was like, hang on, you play footy?
I think I'm going to retire soon, though.
Oh, you're getting too old, are you?
Getting
She's
too
won
old.
a
I'm
lot
the
of
old
reigns,
lady
yeah.
now.
They need that
Yeah.
guidance.
She's got a lot of trophies.
Yeah.
How many championships, Nicole?
5
Five
times.
5 rings. That's like as many as
Pretty
Michael
good.
Jordan. Or I think he's got 6. All right. So Nicole, I took this off the tracks. Let's
No,
really
you
help
didn't.
us get
That
back
was
on.
good. I want to talk about when you're building a team that quickly. How are you keeping the culture? How are you creating processes and onboarding and all of that? How close are you? Have you built all that and you've exited now, or are you still involved in that?
I work mainly with our CEO and the exec team, and I mentor a bunch of people in the business. So I don't, day-to-day operationally, I don't have a lot of involvement in those projects. I do more innovation projects, like we built a 7-week training program for new team members. Look, I love that stuff. I think when you're scaling, it's hard because people don't always keep up with growth, and not everyone's built for growth. But I think if you look at the playbook of businesses at scale that have got good cultures, it's in the DNA, and that's the big part we focus on is vision, mission. How do we get them drinking the Toa Kool-Aid, if that's the word? We want them bought
Swag.
into. We want them bought into what we're doing and where we're going. And I think we attract a lot of talent for the opportunity of what they can come and develop with us because we are fast growing. And I always ask any new leader or even anyone that starts in any of Australia or US, like, why do you join us? And a lot of them, it is that purpose, but it's also we want to be part of something to say we were part of that journey. My DNA is in that. So we get people that are entrepreneurial thinking is probably one way. They're growth focused as opposed to, I just want to go and do this role and I want to sit in this role for the next 10 years and I don't like growth. I don't like change. I mean, we've got technology team of 28 people. We've got business analysts that basically just map process and then we automate as much as we can. We're very focused on getting people to do the work of value that they should be doing as opposed to work that technology can do, but we just haven't implemented it. And I think that's the big thing for me is lifting everyone up the value chain to do what we call meaningful work. Mm-hmm. Because if you're doing something repetitively and technology can automate it, why would you let your team members do that? Why would you not give them more meaningful work? And more meaningful can mean many things. Like we've got a data team. I call them the data nerds. They sit in this data lake and all they do is data all day, every day. And they're data architects. I don't fully get what they do, but they just sit there in their world. But for them, that's fully exciting to be able to do predictive analysis and AI and all this. That is meaningful work for them. For me, I'd hate it, but that's not what my role is. So I think with us, we just try and look at everyone doing meaningful work that links back to the greater vision. I think growth helps with culture, to be honest. You know, when I've had other businesses that haven't grown as fast, cultures still can be good. It's more purposeful. But when you're growing, there's always things happening. There's always things to celebrate and exciting things coming. So you're always sort of buying into that. But at the end of the day, culture is I call it an academic word. I think culture is a process at the end of the day. Culture is about implementing things that you purposely do to make your team feel valued and focused on them.
So how much time does your team spend internally doing things like that to build culture versus working with their firm in America, right? Because it's important that they also fit in with the culture of the firm they're working for, because that's who they're working with most of the time. So how do you balance those two things? You have Toa's culture on one hand, and then you have the firm that they're working for on another hand.
It's a challenge. I always relate it back to like it's having a separated parents. It's like having a mum and dad, because they'll go to mum, sometimes they'll go to dad. Look, we try and make them feel part of the Toa culture. So in the Philippines, that they feel part of where we are and our DNA, but ultimately they're working with their client, and that is who they should feel really part of. So we do a lot of culture events, sports fests. I call them community things. We get them brought into the Toa community in the Philippines. So we have free lunches on Fridays. We have sports festivals. We have team building days.
Free lunch Fridays. I want to join.
We do a bunch of things, but a lot of it is traditionally in lunch or after hours. A lot of what we do is coach our clients on how to build a culture with a remote team, because ultimately we want our team member to feel part of their team. That's who their client is. We're just the ones providing everything to make that magic happen. So we really double down, because, a lot of accounting firms are so busy, they don't have time to really think about, I need to be purposeful on my culture. I need to teach. One of the sessions I did at a roadshow in Australia a couple of months ago to our Australian clients was talking about the work that accountants do. I look at a lot of job ads globally on, you're going to be doing P&Ls, you're going to be doing tax returns, you're going to be doing all these things, which sounds it's boring. Like, that's just a ticket to the game. What I want to know about is, what's your firm's purpose? What impact do you make to the small businesses? And I think accountants aren't great at telling stories. And I think the story is that the work that accountants do every day is having an impact on a small business or a medium business that has an impact on a local community. I mean, that's who those small businesses service. They're a cafe, they're serving coffees, and they're having an impact on helping people get ready for work. Like, I think we just don't package up the work that accountants do and how valuable it is. And that's really where we try to, I suppose, teach our clients to talk about purpose and mission and why you do what you do every day, because that will give people chills, and people want to work for a firm like that, as opposed to, come here, you do tax returns and hope you stay.
So what is the average size firm that works with you guys?
Yeah, look, I think we deal with the number 8 firm in America, which is 5,000 staff, $1.5 billion, right through to sole practitioners. So we deal with everything in between. We don't have one, I suppose, size client that is better. But if you look at the average size of an accounting firm globally is 2 to 3 partners and up to 20 staff. That's the typical, I call it mid-size accounting firm. It's not really a mid-size, but that's sort of the sweet spot where a lot of our clients are. But that was pre-COVID. Post-COVID, it's a lot of the firms that have got 20 plus are the ones coming to us now, because they're the ones that just can't find talent. But
do you have a defined persona, like a type of client that you're marketing to?
Yeah, look, it's always been initially, particularly in America, when it was the innovative firms. It was traditionally cloud-based. It was firms that are people-focused. It was firms that were focused on
people-focused.
Yeah,
like that's
People
progressively.
matter most.
People matter most. Yeah, and if you're people-focused, then you're focused on your people. Are they as focused on their overseas people or their outsourced people?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing we've had to teach a lot of people, is that particularly with global teams where people haven't managed a remote team before. I think COVID's helped us with that, because now everyone has.
Yeah.
But we don't want firms that treat their team members like a commodity. People are your biggest asset at the
Like
end of the day.
AI?
Other people go, it's just the sweatshop or low-cost labor. I mean, they're humans at the end of the day. They're no different to you and I. They just live in a different country. And they want a career much like any one of your other team members do. So it's about, if you're not willing to invest in helping them to build a career, you just want to give them a job, they're not going to stick around. Turnover will be too high. It makes our job twice as hard, because we've got to recruit and replace. So we do want firms that are people-focused, that recognise that we're a service-based business and we're human-driven. And no matter how much technology automates what we do, we are a human-based service business. And that will never change. It's just the work that we do will change.
Well,
Yeah.
I can speak to my experience. I have been working with my VA a lot lately, and he's my friend, and he's in Philippines. There isn't any difference between that and somebody that could be miles down the road.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, I looked, when I had my accounting firm in Australia, I had 12 people in it and 11 were non-Australians. They weren't born in Australia. 11 of them were. We're multicultural, diverse teams these days. So, look, I think the human part's the fun part. I think that's where, our biggest challenges are people. People have emotions, not always logical.
People are complex.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, that's also the flip side is once you understand that, and I think it's like if you look at sporting, and Nick, you've won 5 championships, you know what high-performing teams are. Like, I think too many people don't treat their businesses like sport. They don't look at performance. Like, I always say accountants want to get great output by their team members, but they give them like a flat soccer ball or a flat footy. Go and be the best you can, but I'm going to make you do data entry when there's software like Dext or HubSpot, or why would you do something when tech can do it? Like, you're giving your team like a flat football to go and play on the professional stage with. You got to treat it. And it's also like human performance. Like, a lot of what we look at is how do we get speed to competency, speed to success, most output. Like, it's all human performance. People need to be, you need to focus on that people part because it's their health, it's the wellness, it's making sure they have a break. Like, it's counterintuitive that during tax season, you should make your team have a holiday. Like, well, hang on, we're working 6-7 days a week. It's like, well, no one can sustain that mental performance. But yet no one actually looks at it from that side of it. They're like, well, we'll just, they can have a break at the end. Yeah, no, if you want optimum performance, get them to work 4 days. Have a long weekend. Like, during tax season, yes, don't get them to work 16-hour days. They're not going to be as effective.
The 4-day work week. Shout out to Tim Ferriss. That's a book that's
4
still
hour.
popular.
No, it's 4. His
hours.
is 4 hours.
Oh, yeah.
4
Yeah,
hours.
4 hours, dog. Yeah.
He took it a long way further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would do if I didn't work.
Yeah, if it wasn't
What would I
like
do the rest of the time?
I could spend maybe 4 hours a day. That's a good book, Behind You Mindset. Carol Dweck. My wife is reading that. Do you have any book recommendation?
I read a book every fortnight. So my book goal is 26 books.
Fortnight is 2 weeks?
2 weeks, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so every 2 weeks I aim to read a book. So
wow,
I've got heaps. I mean, one of the ones behind me is the Phil Knight, the Nike story. I
want to read that. That one, I think you may have mentioned that on our last call.
Yeah.
So
the other one up here is The Ride of a Lifetime, which is the CEO of Disney. That was a real interesting.
Those are 2 good ones, right? Of a lifetime.
Real interesting one. But yeah, I read a lot. I consume a lot. Like, I probably listen to 10, 15 podcasts a week.
I love podcasts.
I love that. I read. I have that book goal.
Do you track the books that you read? Are you measuring that?
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Basically, when I start it, when I finish it, how long it's taken, what it is, so I can go back 4 years now and see all the. I also watch a lot of, I call them documentaries. Like, there was one on Netflix. Oh no, sorry, it was on Apple. We Crashed, which is the WeWork story.
That was a great one. Yeah,
that was interesting. I'm watching the one on Uber now, which is on Paramount Plus. The story of Uber, which is
I haven't seen that yet.
I just finished the 7th one. It was the 7th. It's a series. Interesting, but it just stimulates. Like, WeWork and Uber, the 2 CEOs of that were like next level crazy. But it is, they didn't do what they did not being like that.
Yeah, the next level crazy, but there's no different than Steve Jobs.
No.
And people like, they create their own force field reality around themselves. They have the strong will to make what they vision and see happen.
I think that's the difference with the younger generations coming through is a lot more of them are job hoppers. They 1 to 2 years max in a job and they're moving. I don't think that I think what's been lost is that Tim Ferriss might be part of the reason, the 4-hour work week. Like, you can't build great things by not doing the work. Like, one of my mantras is I outwork all of our competitors. I do a lot more than they do in hours and effort, in everything, which is why we outgrow them. If you don't want that, that's cool. You don't have to. But if you want to get somewhere, you need to do the work. I mean, your podcasts and everything you do, everyone sees the episode published.
Oh, trust me.
They don't see everything
behind
behind
work. The amount of work, it's so much work.
But that's why you built what you're building, and that's your brand is like so known. And I think, but you do the work, and it's the work when no one's looking, and that's 99% of what everyone's work is. When I had a mate of mine that just exited out of a business after 20 years software. He did really well, but he was like, I was an overnight success after 20 years. it was only when he sold that he got to actually, people was like, oh, actually, is that what you've been doing?
Well, that's what James said too. James has been known to say that in our James Ashford. We had him on. He was talking about how that happened with him when he sold to Sage. Like all of the work that he put in, some people just nobody sees that. It's elusive too.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's how it's almost like that's the ego is the enemy. Anything that is satisfying the ego, and that's so hard to do for most people, especially people that have aspirations for power or for leadership. They feed into all that. So that's one book that I'm going to go back to.
I think it's the flip side though, because there's so much talk about the hustle and getting ahead and doing that, but then there's also it's overworking to a degree. So it's that balancing act of following your passion and doing the work to be successful. But I think the hustle became more of a lingo and a thing spoken about. I think Gary V,
yeah, love
him or hate him, he's got...
that's funny you mentioned his name. I have his name on my list of people to reach out to because his name keeps coming up and I don't even know who it is.
He's cool story, and he's very authentic. He's very genuine. But he's all about the hustle. He's very much as well about building, empires, and he wants to own the New York Jets. And the only reason I know that is because he talks about it all the time. And he's out there, but he's doing he is like a machine. Like he works like crazy hours, and I think that's the sort of hustle thing where people think, oh, I need to just work for 16 hours a day. It's like, well, no, it needs to be purposeful. It's not just doing it for the sake of doing it.
It's talking too. There's a certain aspect of things in motion as you're talking versus action. And I'm sure he has a great balance of that where he has a lot of action, yet he speaks on things and manifests it, and eventually it happens. So I don't doubt that he will one day be the owner of the Jets because he's manifested that, because he made it happen over time. And it's one of those big goals that eventually come to fruition. I mean, I get that. And that's how a lot of these visionaries are, is they talk about something, but they also have the balance of somebody that can put in the work too. Yeah. A lot of times there's two people behind the scenes of every big company or every big thing. And it's always the one that's putting in the work.
Definitely is. I think that's the unspoken thing, is that this business, and I look at this, my business is well beyond me. My business is now about how can we attract the best talent globally to really grow it. And I think that every business is the same. When I had a 5-person accounting firm when we first started, right through to now, it's the businesses with the best teams ultimately win. The ones with the best people that can attract, A players as opposed to reserve grade players or C grade players. Or that's just the reality that the one with the best talent wins. Mm-hmm. And I think the one that buys into where they're going. But you got to focus on being a place that attracts good talent, because there's a lot of sporting teams, I'll use in Australia, they're known as retirement homes. At the end of your career, you go there, you get a big check, and you live on the Gold Coast, for example, but the team sucks.
Speaking of, there's a great show on HBO now too. It's Winning Time. That one I think you'd really like, and it's the build of the Laker dynasty. And now we have 2 Gold Coast teams for us that are dynasties in the making as well. There's the Golden States.
I got so worried.
That's Nicole's team, yeah. And then you got the Lakers, who are still dominant. They're still a force to be reckoned with. But yeah, sorry, that I think we have that too. That was the comparison. But it's a great. I mean, it's just the rise of the Laker dynasty. It's the rise of Magic Johnson and everybody around him. That's just a plug for that. They paid us to say that. It's great though.
So what's next for you, Nicholas?
It's a good question. I love what I do. I love the game. Well, we're building out an education business, so we've launched that in the Philippines and in Australia. We'll be launching that in America. We're becoming a private college in America.
So you have a training company.
It's focused on accounting and bookkeepers, and it's largely was built to train our team in the Philippines to get to that speed to competency quicker. But then we started having clients locally in Australia saying, look, you're a registered training business. Can you do that with our local teamers? Why is it only them? So it became a business sort of out of default.
I'm seeing a pattern here.
Yeah, and
solving your own problems, and then
it is.
solving
And
other
I mean,
people's
we're
problems.
looking at like even
Ooh, I said that to Guy on the recent episode with Guy too. Like,
Well, that's what we did with the outsourcing, right? And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
other
just-
people got
it
in.
is.
What are you doing?
so I love what I do. I love the people part of, I suppose, what we do, and that's really where we're looking at like how do we just keep augmenting what we do and adding more value to our clients, and that means ultimately more services. So, yeah, love the niche, love the industry. It's very different and quirky in many ways, but
oh hell yeah.
it's been something I've been part of now for 20 years. So it's
Well, the training grounds for that's a beautiful thing to graduate to, right? Like you've like Nicole said, you solve your problems, and now you're solving the world's problems, because that's an issue. You were just talking about at the beginning of the episode how not a lot of people are going into this,
No.
so you can get people where they're at, meet them where they're at, is what Nicole says a lot.
Yeah.
Like you find somebody that's getting ready to start this as a career. They didn't learn any of it their whole life, yet they could be one of the best accountants and pick it up, effortlessly. So, you're going to have to be able to meet them where they're at, train them up. And after about 2 years, to graduate you and go work somewhere else, right?
yeah,
It's,
yeah.
As part of
Is
your
it a 2-year
hiring,
term? Sorry. Yeah.
I was going to ask, as part of your hiring process, do you have a test that you have applicants do? Because that's one thing I thought that would be useful, is if somebody could build a tool where you could test applicants on
they
like
have
Zero or like review
There
these
is.
financial
It's
statements.
Called, it's a New Zealand company actually built technology for that. It's called Account Test.
Account tests.
I
they
saw
just
that. I didn't
sponsored-
see that they were doing software tests, but I
No, they
maybe
don't.
need
Sorry,
to look
they-
at their website.
They don't do software. They do more accounting, I suppose.
More like debits and credits.
Yeah. They do a personality test now. I mean, we have built our own training, obviously, just with trying to filter down the talent to get the best. We do filter down. We don't do any software training because traditionally in the Philippines, they haven't used any Intuit products. They haven't used Xero. None of those Sage, none of those products are really in the Philippines. But, our average age of our team members are 30, so they're quite tech savvy, so it's quite easy to learn. We have training to teach them how to use it, but we don't typically test them, more because of the age demographic we're employing. It's
Yeah,
almost
just kind of assuming they're tech savvy.
it's a ticket to the game. Like, if you can't use a computer, then you're going to struggle to get a job.
Yeah, I was just thinking too, like the different ways to train people on different platforms. I guess it's different from person to person too. Like from firm to firm, they use things differently almost. So if there was some universal, I don't even know how you would test for that. Actually, it's kind of what I was thinking. But then
And then there's the soft skills too, right? The ability to, I don't know, how many of your team members, Nick, are actually speaking to, I guess it depends on the firm owner, right? Whether they want the team member to speak directly to the clients or not.
Yeah,
And then-
it does vary. It really does.
And then,
vary.
so obviously the time difference in the U.S. is opposite. So is your team working night shifts supporting the U.S.
They work
companies?
US time zone, so they do work night shift, which is, when we started doing night shift, I was like, how are we going to get anyone to work on it? And I went there and, not the last visit, or it was the last visit, I went there on the night shift and I walked around, I'm like, what drives you to work on the night shift? Like, from a work-life balance, like, how's that work? You got young kids. And they're like, this is the best work-life balance because I go home, the kids are at school. So I finish at 6, I go home. The kids are going to school, so I get to take them to school. Then I come home, then I sleep. And then I wake up and the kids are back from school. And then I get to hang out with them. And then I go to work at like 8 o'clock at night so I can start at night. Like, that for me is work-life balance because I get more valuable time with my family than if I work for 7 to 4. I don't see the kids in the morning. I can't take them to school. And by the time I get home, it's 5 or 6 at night and they're going to bed. So which one's really work-life balance? And I was like, that's actually got a real point. Like, once you adapt to working that shift, probably better balance really for your family life.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree,
I couldn't do it.
Time is an illusion.
Yeah.
I've said this before.
Yeah.
Time is definitely an illusion. I mean, you got people right now that are working cross borders. But even so, like if you're working with somebody in California and somebody's on the East Coast, there's still like not that much overlap anymore. It becomes a 4-hour workday if you're trying to work within that overlap. I mean, me here, 7:30 for me. What time is it for you?
What's 9?
What time is it for you right now?
Yeah, 9
a.m. Tomorrow. You're in the future.
I'm in front of you.
You're in the future.
Yeah, you're in the
Coming to
future.
you from-
Nicole's in the past. You know, I'm the
Dang
only
it.
one in
That's
the
the West-
present.
that's the West
past,
Coast.
present, and the future.
The West Coast.
Yeah. When you're working at night, everybody's kind of in charge of what they do. And I think the work from, so then it'll get to like the work from home versus working in an office. You guys still have your locations that people, do they have to go back there now? Like, are you requiring them to be on site?
Yeah, well, I mean, we weren't. The government mandated it. So a return to work order was put in place in the Philippines from the 1st of April that all BPO workers were back in office. So,
Well, they don't have to. You could tell them they could work from home.
yeah, well, so we work in PESA zones or tax incentive zones. So that's where all the BPOs work in those zones. And those zones there is no choice. 95% of
Okay.
our workforce has to be in office every day. Otherwise, we get fined.
Oh.
So that's a misrepresentation that some people have, because not a lot of people know it's forced. A lot of people think that TOA is the one that's making them work there. Because I've had other outsourced discussions where they say, well, some they allow them to work at home. TOA, they have to work there. But that's now you're saying that it's a
It's
government
mandated. Some of the companies will set up in areas where there is no tax incentive, but they also don't necessarily pay taxes. So there are a bunch of people that are working from home. Like I know one outsourcing company, they're not actually a company in the Philippines, they're a company in Australia, and they just have contractors, and those contractors can work from home or anything, but they don't pay tax locally in the Philippines. They don't follow any labor laws in the Philippines. They're just contractors. So there's no proper relationship. And in that case, the government don't know about it. They can't administer it. But,
Right.
I think you can look at it. The BPO industry, the outsourcing industry is 20% of the GDP. But if you go in, it's like being in New York City and having no businesses in the office towers. It affects the cafes, it affects the restaurants, it affects the taxis, the Ubers, the buses, like all of the ecosystem that is around it. And that was a large part of the Philippines. They wanted to get their economy moving again, which means they need everyone back in jobs. There isn't.
Well, this is the issue right now. I don't go to an office, so I don't go out much.
No.
Everything I do is brought to me.
Yep. And I also think there's, if you look at the health side of it as well, and you can argue for work from home. And I mean, it's the end of the day, I think there's going to be work from home fatigue in a couple of years because of people's mental health. I think if you sit in a room by yourself all day, you're going to go crazy. It's like when they put people in isolation in jails, they go crazy for a reason. It's, work from home is probably not going to be that extreme, but it is going to be, how do you stimulate people still?
You need 3D interactions. This 2D stuff isn't cutting it. I like to see people in person. That's what it means to be human, right? To be around other people. And I never heard anybody call it like a prison. I like the way you put it there.
Look, I think, some people love the work from home and it does have that flexibility. I think what people want is flexibility. They want the ability to potentially not have to work in one environment all the time. Some people want to travel and work wherever. So I think it's more around that flexibility. I think that the term, it's either at the moment there's the hard wall for work from home or in office. And you sort of have to pick a side, and I don't think it is. I think it's about what is the flexibility that you need in your role. Like there's a bunch of people that work for us that, and we attract people that love working in office, but there's a bunch that do work hybrid. And for them, it's just having that flexibility that on those few days, they can have that because they can drop the kids off and pick them up.
Does the government allow that?
Not so much in the Philippines. That's more here, to be honest. Yeah, it's good and bad. Like the return to work, it was harder being remote for us in the business that we do. So the government saying everyone back in the office in a week for us was a lot of work, but it was also, we can get back to being what we were. So our theme this quarter, we run on quarterly themes, was Back to the Future because it was back to how we used to be. And then it was that human connection. And first few days, people coming back in, they're like,
Back to the Future. That was great. I love how we got there.
Yeah, but
because you're in the future.
Yeah, but that's the funny thing is that the first few days, people are like, I don't like this. I'm, traveling, I'm doing all this. But then they get back into it and they see that human side and they're like, I missed this. I really missed this. this connectivity and being around people and, after work going and hanging out again. I think
I'll bet you that my employees start to say that, but I'm going to give them a little while to say it again.
Yeah.
But now my whole team is local. Now I don't even have people that are remote. We're just all working remotely.
Yeah. I think it'll be a combination. I think it'll be,
I guess
we say more in than out. You've got to be in the office more in than out, which means 3 and 2. And that gives people a good enough blend. They get a hit of being around. I think the reality is we have significantly seen, like we had our South African team over in Australia. We had all of our global leaders last week in our Australian office for our quarterly planning. And the South African team said to me, they're like, one of our leaders said, look, I've got more this week by being around the environment and the people here, like more knowledge than I did in the last 12 months working for you guys. Like he goes, I love working from home, but I need this hit. And we're like, all right, well, how do we give people that are remote that hit, whether that be every quarter or every 6 weeks, or how do you give them that? Because people work together so well. Like if we're all in a room doing this, we'd probably be vibing a little bit different to how we are now. Still cool, but I think you just have that natural human connection. And I think that's the part is how do you blend both so that you maximize the productivity and effectiveness?
Nick, have you solved that problem of remote workers trying to get a hit or trying to get that collaboration where they're learning?
We're not really a remote workforce. It's more our international workforce trying to get them together. So, for the South African teams and the international teams, we're just going to try and pull everyone together every quarter for the leadership team to get them in person. But we are an office-first business. We're not apologetic about it. That's just our business model. And, we attract people that thrive in that environment as opposed to repel from it. So I can't really comment because it's not really our thing.
Well, your teams outside of the Philippines, are they mostly sales teams?
Sales, account management, people experience, technology.
Account management is sales.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah. Our tech team are all outside, so they're all based outside. A lot of them are outside the Philippines. Our leadership team, it's mainly our support services.
Sure.
So recruiters.
Sure. And so that means it's people that are look and feel like us, because that's a lot of our clients from overseas. They create these U.S. arms, and we handle the U.S. part of the business. So anybody they hire is usually sales first.
Yep.
It's always going to be sales, outreach, and support. And we handle all of the U.S.-based hiring laws and everything else, the U.S. taxes. So that's been a bit of a vertical for us, actually, exploring that a little bit more, too. I talk about all these other homegrown verticals, but honestly, that's how we defined ourselves, and it's because it's zero users.
Yeah.
It's always zero users from across the pond or
Australia,
somewhere else
we
in
get
the
some
country.
of those too.
Yeah, and because they use zero, they find us, and then they want to go deeper and certainly help. That's Nick, I've appreciated your tips today.
Oh, it's exciting. I love conversations with this. I love talking to people that are active in the industry and doing good things, and I love what you guys do.
Well, thank you, Nick. We're going to cue the outro music. Enjoy the company. See you, homie.
Good to see you, Nick.